At the dawn of Western civilization, a revolution was brewing. It was not a war of swords and shields, but a battle fought in the silent field of the human mind, a transformation so profound that it forever redefined our relationship with the cosmos. Our journey begins here, on the sun-drenched shores of the Aegean Sea, around the 6th century before Christ. We delve into a world woven with the threads of myth, a cosmos governed by capricious gods whose passions and conflicts were reflected in storms, harvests, and the fate of mortals. This was the realm of mythos, the sacred narrative that explained the why of all things. The historical context of this era is an amalgamation of prosperity and tension. Archaic Greece was not a unified nation, but a mosaic of city-states, the polis, each fiercely protective of its independence and in constant competition. In Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and Thebes, the structures of power varied, with the first and fragile experiments of democracy beginning to take shape. Life was anchored in tradition. Poets like Homer and Hesiod were not mere storytellers, they were the architects of the collective consciousness. Their epics had codified the Olympic pantheon, giving the Greeks a shared cultural language, a way to understand their place in a universe dictated by divine will. Every lightning bolt was an act of Zeus. Every earthquake, a fury of Poseidon. There was no room for chance, only for the intention of the gods. But on the periphery of this world, in the prosperous trading cities of Ionia, on the coast of present-day Turkey, a new class of thinkers was emerging. They were merchants and aristocrats whose fortunes did not depend on inherited land, but on maritime trade. Their ships sailed to Egypt and Babylon, bringing not only goods but also knowledge. Fragments of geometry, astronomy, and new ways of seeing the world. For these men, whose decisions were based on the logic of navigation and accounting, the old stories, as majestic as they were, began to sound hollow. Upon encountering cultures that had their own gods and creation myths, radically different from their own, an inevitable question must have arisen in their minds. If each people has its own divine truths, can any of them be the absolute truth? It was a gradual choice, that of a restless elite, the decision to look beyond myth in search of a more universal and coherent explanation. Thus began a momentous event. The slow and profound shift from mythos to logos logos a Greek word rich in meanings, reason, argument, study. It was a Copernican turn in human perspective. Instead of asking who caused a phenomenon, a new generation of thinkers began to ask how and why it occurred. In the bustling port of Miletus, a nerve center of trade and ideas, this new impulse found its cradle. The cosmos, which had previously been a stage for divine drama, began to be seen as a cosmos, an ordered, intelligible system, and most importantly, governed by inherent and discoverable principles. It was not a violent rejection of the gods, but the bold proposal that beneath the surface of myths lay a rational structure, a nature, physis that could be understood by the human mind. Was it the political freedom of the Ionian polis less rigid than their continental counterparts, that allowed this critical thought to flourish? Or was it the practical necessity of navigators to understand the world in a predictable way? The consequences of this change were seismic, although at first they resonated only in very limited circles. A new form of inquiry was born, natural philosophy. For the first time in recorded history, the human mind embarked on the quest for an arche, a fundamental principle underlying all the diversity of the visible world. This search for a first cause, for unity in multiplicity, marked the birth not only of philosophy, but also of science. A new language was being forged to describe reality, one based on observation, hypothesis, and logical argumentation rather than revelation and tradition. The world was ceasing to be a poem and slowly becoming a problem to be solved. And yet at the heart of this intellectual dawn, a fundamental enigma persists. Why here? Why at this precise moment in human history? The economic and political conditions of Ionia were undoubtedly fertile ground, but they cannot alone explain the spark that ignited the flame. What catalyst transformed curiosity into a system of inquiry? Was it an individual genius, a fortunate confluence of minds, or an inevitable evolution of human thought once a certain level of social complexity was reached? The mystery of the origins of philosophy is, in essence, the mystery of the dawn of our own reason. But although the general conditions remain an enigma, tradition has preserved the name of the first man who took the decisive step. The first to propose a purely natural explanation of the universe. This revolutionary quest for an underlying principle begins with one man in one city. Our journey into the mind of the first philosopher now takes us to the bustling port of Ionia to uncover the legacy of Thales of Miletus. If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. And at the epicenter of this monumental transition from myth to reason, a figure emerges from the mists of time, a name that resonates as the first echo of Western thought. His story does not unfold in the temples of Athens, but in the vibrant and cosmopolitan port of Miletus on the coast of Ionia, present-day Turkey. Here, in the 6th century before Christ, the air was not only laden with sea salt and the aroma of exotic spices, but also with a murmur of ideas coming from Egypt, Babylon, and beyond. Miletus was a commercial nexus, a melting pot where the wealth of the mercantile elite financed not only war and politics, but also leisure and speculation. In this environment, where the old stories of capricious gods began to seem insufficient for sailors and merchants who depended on the regularity of the stars and the seasons, one man would dare to ask the most radical question of all. That man was Thales. Considered by Aristotle as the founder of natural philosophy, Thales of Miletus was not a reclusive ascetic. He was a public figure, a statesman, an engineer, an astronomer, and a mathematician. His foundational act, the one that fractured ancient thought, was not a political proclamation nor a military feat, but an intellectual turn of extraordinary audacity. Thales decided to seek an explanation for the cosmos that did not involve the gods. In a world where an earthquake was the wrath of Poseidon and a lightning bolt the fury of Zeus, he proposed that the universe operated according to intrinsic and comprehensible principles. But how could a single man challenge millennia of divine tradition? His method was observation, his tool, logic. His great quest was the arche, the principle or fundamental substance from which everything else derived. After observing the world around him, Thales arrived at a surprising conclusion. The arche was water. This idea, which today may seem simple, was at the time a revolution. Why water? Because life depends on it. Because moisture is present in food, in air, in all living beings. Because water is the only substance that Thales could observe in its three states. Solid like ice, liquid like the sea, and gaseous like steam. Instead of seeing the wrath of Poseidon in a tremor of the earth, Thales proposed an astonishing image: the earth, a flat disk floating on an infinite ocean. Earthquakes were not divine whims, but the simple sway of our world over this vast, watery bed. Legends tell that his genius was not limited to theory. It is said that using his knowledge of geometry learned in Egypt, he was able to measure the height of the pyramids simply by measuring the length of their shadow at the time of day when his own shadow was equal to his height, an act that demonstrated that human reason could unravel the secrets of shapes and distances. His most famous feat, recounted by the historian Herodotus, was the supposed prediction of a solar eclipse in the year 585 before Christ, an event that halted a battle between the Lydians and the Medes. Was it a stroke of luck, or the first great victory of calculation over chaos? The consequences of this new approach were transformative. Thales did not found a religion but a tradition, the school of Miletus. He inspired his disciples, Anaximander and Anaximenes, to continue his quest, to question his conclusions, and to propose their own theories about the archer. Anaximander would posit the apeiron, the indefinite, and Anaximenes, air. What was crucial was not the answer, but the fact that the question could be formulated and debated. For the first time in the recorded history of the West, a critical dialogue was established about the fundamental nature of reality. A dialogue free from divine dogmas. The human mind, by the decision of an Ionian thinker, had declared itself as a tool capable of understanding the universe. The door to science and philosophy had been thrown wide open. However, the legacy of Thales is shrouded in deep mystery. The greatest enigma he poses to us is his silence. Not a single line written by his own hand has reached us. All we know of him comes through second- and third-hand accounts, primarily from Aristotle, who wrote nearly 2 centuries later. Are we reconstructing a man from the echoes of his legend? Was he truly the singular figure who ignited the flame of reason, or simply the first name that survived in a chain of anonymous thinkers? The absence of his own words makes him a fascinating shadow, a point of origin as fundamental as it is elusive, whose true depth we may never come to know. The question about the fundamental substance of the cosmos had been raised. But while Thales' successors would seek the answer in other physical elements, a different mind elsewhere in the Greek world would propose that the key to the universe was not a substance at all, but something much more abstract and ethereal. The number, the harmony of the cosmos, according to Pythagoras, could be heard in mathematics. As the legacy of Thales of Miletus left a new way of questioning the world in Ionia, seeking the principle of everything in tangible elements, a distinct, almost mystical echo began to resonate from the island of Samos. This new thought would not seek truth in water or air, but in an abstract, invisible and eternal plane, that of numbers. Its prophet was a man whose very life has become an enigma, a figure shrouded in the shadow of legend. Pythagoras. In the middle of the 6th century before our era, Greek Ionia lived under the growing pressure of the Persian Empire, a giant threatening to devour the freedom of its cities. In Samos, the tyrant Polycrates ruled with an iron fist. And it was in this climate of political oppression that Pythagoras, a man already renowned for his wisdom and his travels to Egypt and Babylon, made a decision that would change the history of thought. He decided to go into exile, seeking a new home in the distant Magna Graecia in the south of present-day Italy. It was not a simple escape. It was the migration of an idea in the prosperous city of Croton. Pythagoras did not found a school in the traditional sense, but a brotherhood, an ascetic and secret community with deep religious and political connotations. But who was this man capable of inspiring such absolute devotion? Ancient sources describe him as a charismatic, almost divine figure. It was said that he had a golden thigh, that he could be in 2 places at once, and that he remembered his past lives. Separating the man from the myth is an almost impossible task, a mystery that his own followers took care to cultivate. Pythagoras' crucial decision was to structure his community into 2 circles. The outer circle, the akousmatikoi, or listeners, followed strict rules of life: vegetarianism, loyalty, and ritual silence. But the inner circle, the mathematikoi, or learners, had access to the secret core of his doctrine, a knowledge that they believed revealed the very order of the universe. The development of this doctrine is one of the most profound intellectual revolutions of antiquity. Legend has it that Pythagoras, passing by a blacksmith shop, noticed that the hammers striking the anvil produced harmonious sounds. Intrigued, he discovered that the weight of the hammers held simple numerical proportions to one another. This was the seminal moment. Experimenting with a monochord or one-string instrument, he demonstrated that the musical intervals that the human ear perceives as pleasant, the octave, the fifth, the fourth, corresponded to exact mathematical relationships: 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. The discovery was groundbreaking. If musical harmony, something so ethereal and emotional, was governed by the cold logic of numbers, what else could be? Could it be that the entire cosmos was a mathematical composition, a divine symphony inaudible to mortal ears? Thus was born the idea of the music of the spheres. the belief that the planets in their celestial orbits produced a perfect harmony, a numerical order that was the soul of the universe. For the Pythagoreans, the number was not just a tool, it was the arche, the fundamental principle of all reality. The immediate consequences of this movement were not merely philosophical. The Pythagorean Brotherhood, with its discipline and cohesion, accumulated considerable political influence in Croton and other cities of Magna Graecia, promoting aristocratic governments. But this power generated resentment. Around the year 500 before our era, a popular revolt, supposedly led by a noble named Cylon who had been denied entry into the Brotherhood, violently rose against them. Their meeting places were set on fire and members of the community were killed or forced to disperse. Although the political power of the Brotherhood was destroyed, their ideas, freed from their original secrecy, spread throughout the Greek world like seeds in the wind, indelibly influencing future thinkers, notably Plato. And here lies the central enigma of the chapter. The legacy of Pythagoras is dual. On one hand, he laid the foundations of mathematics as a deductive discipline and the idea that the universe is understandable through reason. On the other, he founded a mystical sect based on secrecy and dogma. What unconfessable secrets did this brotherhood hold? One of the deepest seems to have been the discovery of irrational numbers. The existence of the square root of 2, the diagonal of a square with a side of 1, a number that could not be expressed as a fraction, posed a theological crisis for a philosophy that maintained that everything was either a whole number or its proportion. Legend has it that the Pythagorean Hippasus of Metapontum was drowned at sea for revealing this forbidden secret. Was it the pursuit of truth that drove them, or the desire to protect a dogma at any cost? The veil of mystery that the Pythagoreans themselves wove around their leader and his doctrines endures to this day, leaving a legacy as fascinating as it is indecipherable. The legacy of Pythagoras was a quest for permanence, for an eternal and unchanging order hidden behind the veil of reality. But what if the universe was not a static symphony, but an incessant river of transformation? In the same Ionia, another thinker, Heraclitus, was about to propose that the only constant was precisely change. While the school of Pythagoras in southern Italy sought the eternal harmony of the cosmos in the immutable rigidity of numbers, a very different echo resonated from the shores of Ionia in present-day Turkey. There, in the opulent and turbulent city of Ephesus, a solitary and aristocratic thinker observed the world and arrived at a conclusion as radical as it was disturbing. The only constant is change. We find ourselves at the end of the 6th century before Christ. Ephesus is a crossroads, a commercial emporium where goods, ideas, and armies flow incessantly. The city, like the entire Ionian region, lives under the growing shadow of the Persian Empire. The political tension is palpable, a prelude to the imminent Ionian revolt that will stain the Aegean with blood. It is in this cauldron of instability, where fortunes are made and unmade with the tide, that the figure of Heraclitus emerges. Descended, it is said, from the ancient royalty of the city, Heraclitus was a man who looked upon his fellow citizens with disdain. He saw in them a voluntary blindness, an inability to comprehend the true nature of the world they inhabited. In a profound act of rejection of public life and the democracy that was beginning to flourish in other parts of Greece, Heraclitus renounced his hereditary privileges and withdrew, according to legend, to the temple of Artemis, choosing introspection over power. What did this man see in his isolation that others could not perceive? From his self-imposed retreat, Heraclitus forged a philosophy through hammer blows, expressed not in systematic treatises but in cryptic aphorisms and sentences that seemed like lightning in the darkness. His legacy reaches us in fragments, pieces of an intellectual puzzle that has fascinated and frustrated thinkers for more than 2 millennia. The central idea, the one that resonates most strongly, is that of perpetual flow, *pantarai*, everything flows. His most famous metaphor is that of the river. It is not possible to step into the same river twice, for new waters are always flowing over you. This image of deceptive simplicity conceals an abyssal depth. Not only does the river change at every moment, but the observer, the person who enters the water, is also different. We are processes, not fixed entities. Our existence is a blink in a current of incessant transformation. But if everything is change, how is order possible? Is the cosmos simply a senseless chaos? Here is where Heraclitus introduces his most enigmatic and profound concept, the asterisk logos asterisk. The asterisk logos asterisk is the underlying reason, the universal law that governs change. It is an invisible structure, a hidden pattern in the apparent disorder. It is the principle that unifies all things, although most men, like sleepers in their own world, live unaware of it. This asterisk, logos asterisk, manifests through conflict, through the tension between opposites. War, he wrote, is the father and king of all things. For Heraclitus, harmony does not arise from stillness, as the Pythagoreans believed, but from struggle. Day and night, life and death, cold and heat, are not separate entities but aspects of a single unity, two extremes of the same spectrum in dynamic tension. The way up and the way down, he declared, are one and the same. Reality, therefore, is not a collection of static objects, but an eternal dance of opposing forces. Heraclitus's ideas were not well received. His deliberately obscure style and his disdain for common understanding earned him the nickname the Obscure. His contemporaries, accustomed to seeking more stable and comforting explanations, were bewildered by a philosophy that seemed to celebrate instability and contradiction. His thought was a direct challenge to intuition, an invitation to look beyond appearances to find a deeper and often more uncomfortable truth. His immediate influence was limited, but his legacy seeped like an underground river through the history of Western thought. Emerging in the work of Plato, in the Stoics, and reaching modern philosophers like Hegel and Nietzsche. And here lies the central enigma of Heraclitus, a mystery magnified by the loss of his complete works. What exactly was the asterisk logos asterisk? Was it a divine intelligence, an impersonal physical law, or a metaphor for the social order that he believed was lost? By asserting that everything is in perpetual change, was Heraclitus suggesting that certain knowledge is impossible? If reality itself is a river in constant motion, how can we assert something true about it? His fragments are like oracles whispered from the past, clues to a worldview as complete as it is elusive. The fundamental question he bequeaths to us is whether the universe is, in its essence, order or chaos, and whether both could be, in some mysteriously way, the same thing. This whirlwind of perpetual change, this reality in constant becoming, was an idea as dizzying as it was unacceptable to some. From the other side of the Greek world, in the colony of Elea, a thinker would rise to launch the most radical challenge possible, not only to Heraclitus, but to the very perception of reality itself. His response would deny change altogether, proposing a universe where nothing moves and everything that is simply is. The stage was set for the great philosophical duel with Parmenides and his concept of the unchanging being. As the waters of the river of Heraclitus seemed to sweep away all certainty in Ionia, in the distant Greek colony of Elea to the south of Italy, a voice rose to halt the torrent, a voice that spoke not of flow, but of stillness, not of multiplicity, but of an absolute and eternal unity. It was the voice of Parmenides, a thinker whose legacy would resonate as a profound and perplexing enigma through the centuries. To understand his radical proposal, we must first travel to his city, Elea, founded in the middle of the 6th century before Christ by Greek colonists fleeing the Persian invasion in Phocaea. Elea was not a bustling metropolis like Athens or Miletus. It was a refuge, a community forged in the quest for stability in the face of the chaos of the outside world. This yearning for permanence, for a secure order amidst political and military turbulence, seems to have seeped into the very intellectual fabric of the city, creating the perfect breeding ground for a philosophy that would challenge the very notion of change. In this environment, Parmenides emerged not only as a philosopher but as a figure of civic authority. Ancient sources, such as those of Plutarch, suggest that he was a respected legislator, a man tasked with shaping the laws that would govern his community. His crucial decision, however, was not political but intellectual. In an act of unprecedented boldness, Parmenides made the decision to radically distrust the information provided by the senses. The world that we see, hear and touch, with its infinite variety and incessant change, was for him a source of deception. The only reliable guide, the only path to true knowledge, was pure logic, the logos taken to its most relentless conclusion. But what truth could reason reveal that was so contrary to all human experience? The mystery began to take shape in a monumental poem that would change the course of Western thought. The development of his doctrine is presented to us through the surviving fragments of his only known work, an epic poem titled On Nature. In it, Parmenides narrates an allegorical journey, an ascent from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, guided by an anonymous goddess. This deity reveals to him that there are two paths for thought: the way of truth and the way of opinion. The way of opinion is the path of mortals based on the senses, who believe in the simultaneous existence of being and non-being, of change, of movement, and of multiplicity. But this path, warns the goddess, is a road to perdition. The way of truth, on the other hand, is grounded in an unbreakable logical principle. What is, and it is impossible for it not to be. What is not, and it is necessary for it not to be. From this simple yet powerful premise, Parmenides deduces with ironclad logic the properties of true being. This being is unique, for if there were two, one would not be the other, introducing non-being. It is eternal, for it cannot have come from non-being, nor can it disappear into it. It is unchanging and motionless, since change or movement would imply a prior state in which it was not thus. And it is a perfect sphere, homogeneous and complete. The universe, the authentic reality, was for Parmenides a unique, static and eternal entity. The immediate consequences of this philosophical revelation were seismic. Parmenides' bold construction represented a direct challenge not only to Heraclitus, but to the entire philosophical tradition that sought to explain change and the origin of the cosmos. If being is one and unchanging, how can we explain the vibrant and diverse world we experience every day? Philosophy suddenly found itself at an impasse. The response of Parmenides' followers, such as his brilliant disciple Zeno of Elea, was not to attempt to reconcile both worlds, but to reinforce the logical fortress of their master. Zeno designed his famous paradoxes, that of Achilles and the tortoise, that of the arrow in flight, not as mere mental games, but as powerful defenses that demonstrated the logical impossibility of movement and plurality. Ridiculing the blind trust in the senses, Greek thought was thus fractured, divided between the overwhelming evidence of the senses and the relentless coherence of Parmenidean reason. And it is here that the great enigma of Parmenides resides. Was he describing a physical reality, proposing that the universe was literally an immobile sphere? Or was his being an abstraction, a purely logical or even mystical truth, a higher reality beyond our sensory perception? His poem leaves the question suspended in the air, an echo that resonates to this day. By denying the validity of the sensible world, Parmenides opened an abysmal gap between reality and appearance, between reason and experience. This dilemma would compel future generations of thinkers, especially Plato and Aristotle, to construct entire philosophical systems in an attempt to close that wound. Being had revealed itself, but the world had become a mirage. This philosophical impasse, this chasm between a unique and unattainable truth and the chaotic reality of human experience, left a void that would soon be filled not by seekers of a cosmic truth, but by masters of argument and persuasion, men who would teach that truth was not discovered but constructed for each occasion. The Sophists. If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. But while the echo of Parmenides' philosophy and his unchanging being resonated in the most exclusive circles of thought, In the bustling and dusty streets of 5th century before Christ Athens, a radically different intellectual force began to take shape. This would not be born in the isolation of contemplation, but in the clamour of public life during a time of seismic changes that shook the very foundations of Greek society. After the Persian Wars, Athens, under the leadership of figures such as Pericles, had risen as the hegemonic power, and its newly consolidated democracy demanded from its citizens a new skill, the power of speech. In the assembly, in the courts, the fate of a man or of the city itself could be decided not by the truth of his cause, but by his ability to persuade. It was in this fertile and pragmatic ground where the seed of a new type of thinker germinated. A group of itinerant teachers whose legacy still casts a shadow of controversy and mystery, the Sophists. These men, often foreigners attracted by the wealth and dynamism of Athens, were charismatic figures of formidable intellect. Pythagoras of Abdera, perhaps the most influential, made a decision that would change the course of thought. He declared that man is the measure of all things, of those that are, inasmuch as they are, and of those that are not, inasmuch as they are not. It was a philosophical bombshell. With this statement, Pythagoras not only questioned but dynamited the quest for an absolute and universal truth that had obsessed his predecessors. Truth for him was relative, subjective to the perception of each individual. Another giant among them, Gorgias of Leontini, was a master of the rhetorical art, a charmer whose eloquence was said to be able to hypnotize crowds. Gorgias did not sell the truth. He sold the power of persuasion, the ability to make the weakest argument seem the strongest. His decision was to teach the word not as a vehicle for knowledge, but as a weapon for victory. And then there was Thrasymachus, whose vision was even more stark. Justice, he asserted, is nothing more than the interest of the strongest. The Athenian elites, eager for their children to succeed in the political arena, made the pragmatic decision to pay exorbitant sums to these merchants of knowledge to teach them the secrets of argumentation and public discourse. Thus, philosophy descended from the heights of cosmology and metaphysics to walk among men. But it did so in a way that many found alarming. The Sophists taught heuristics, the art of dispute for the sake of dispute itself, training their students to defend any position regardless of its moral content. Was an accused person guilty? It did not matter. What was crucial was to construct a discourse that made him appear innocent before the jury. Was a policy beneficial for the city? The question was secondary to the ability to present it as such. This instrumental approach to knowledge and language generated a shockwave in Athenian culture. If there was no objective truth, what happened to the concepts of piety, virtue, or justice? Were they mere social conventions? Arbitrary constructions that could be manipulated or discarded at will by whoever mastered the art of speech? The echo of the Sophists' teachings was deeply disturbing for those who still believed in a transcendent moral order, in the ancestral values that had sustained the polis. The immediate consequences were a profound crisis of values and increasing polarization. Conservatives and traditionalists, such as the playwright Aristophanes, saw in the Sophists dangerous charlatans, corrupters of youth who undermined morality and the social fabric for money. Later philosophers, notably Plato, would launch a fierce and lasting critique against them, presenting them as the antagonists of true philosophy, more concerned with appearance than essence, with opinion than truth. However, this view, while influential, might be incomplete. By shifting the focus from nature to the human being, their laws and their society, the Sophists opened entirely new fields of study, laying the foundations for future political science, sociology, and ethics as autonomous disciplines. They forced society to self-examine, to justify its own beliefs instead of taking them for granted. And it is here that the great enigma of this chapter in the history of thought resides. Were the Sophists cynical relativists who, for the sake of profit, sold the soul of Athens, arming a generation with the tools to dismantle morality? Or were they, on the contrary, necessary intellectual catalysts, a shock force that by demolishing old certainties compelled Greek thought to mature, to seek more solid foundations for truth and ethics? Their legacy is a paradox, that of thinkers who, by denying the possibility of secure knowledge, ironically made the search for it more urgent than ever. Amid this whirlwind of uncertainty, as old certainties crumbled under the assault of relativism, a singular and enigmatic figure roamed the same squares of Athens. He did not charge for his teachings and claimed to know nothing, but his method of incessant questioning promised a different path, not to persuade, but to bring forth a truth hidden in the soul, an art that he would call Maieutics, and whose practitioner would change the history of philosophy forever, Socrates. In the bustling marketplace of ideas that the Sophists had left in Athens, where truth had become a commodity and virtue a matter of perspective, a new and perplexing voice began to resonate. It did not come from a formal academy, nor was it offered at a high price, but from the streets, from the agora, from the very heart of a city still licking the wounds of the devastating Peloponnesian War. Athenian democracy, restored after the brief but brutal rule of the 30 tyrants imposed by Sparta, was a fragile, paranoid, and deeply insecure system regarding its own foundations. It was in this breeding ground of political uncertainty and moral relativism that a figure emerged destined to change the course of Western thought forever. A man named Socrates. Unlike the elegant and often wealthy Sophists, Socrates was a walking enigma. Of robust and ungraceful appearance, the son of a sculptor and a midwife, he spent his days wandering barefoot through Athens. Indifferent to material wealth, his mission, as he would claim, was not imposed upon him by personal ambition, but by a divine mandate. His friend Chaerephon, in a decision that would alter history, consulted the oracle of Delphi, asking if there was any man wiser than Socrates. The response from the Pythia was a resounding no. This declaration did not fill Socrates with pride, but with profound perplexity. Aware of his own ignorance, he took the oracle's response not as a compliment, but as a divine riddle, a sacred task. His key decision was, then, to dedicate his life to examining that assertion, interrogating those whom Athenian society considered wise, politicians, poets, and craftsmen, to uncover the true meaning of wisdom. Thus began the development of his legendary method, the Maietic. Using the metaphor of his mother's profession, Socrates did not see himself as a teacher imparting knowledge, but as an intellectual midwife helping others give birth to the ideas they already carried within. His method was a dialogue, a dance of questions and answers known as elenchus, or refutation. He would approach an interlocutor, often a prominent public figure, and begin with a statement of his own ignorance, the famous Socratic irony. Then he would pose an apparently simple question: what is justice? What is virtue? What is courage? The interlocutor, confident in their knowledge, would offer a definition. From there, Socrates, with surgical precision, would launch a series of questions designed to reveal the contradictions and inadequacies of that initial response. The goal was not to humiliate, but to purify the soul of false beliefs, forcing the person to confront their own ignorance. Was it a genuine quest for truth, or a sophisticated form of public humiliation? For his followers, it was an awakening. For his opponents, a corrosive affront. The consequences of this incessant public activity did not take long to manifest. On one hand, Socrates attracted a circle of young aristocrats fascinated by his intellect and integrity. Men like Xenophon and, more crucially, a young man named Plato. They saw in him a living alternative to the cynicism of the Sophists, but on the other hand, his method generated deep resentment among the elites of Athens. Politicians like Anytus, poets like Miletus, and orators like Lycon, publicly humiliated by being exposed as ignorant in their own fields of expertise, began to see Socrates not as a philosopher, but as a dangerous social agitator. They accused him of being a poison in the civic soul, of corrupting the youth, and the most serious charge of all, of impiety, of not believing in the gods of the city and introducing new divinities. In the year 399 before Christ, Athenian democracy, fearful of dissent in its precarious stability, put its most original thinker on trial, and here lies the central enigma of his legacy. Socrates did not write a single word. Everything we know about his life, his method, and his thought comes to us through the writings of others, primarily Plato and Xenophon, but their portrayals do not always coincide. Was he the almost saintly martyr that Plato describes in the Apology and the Crito, who chooses death over betraying his philosophical principles? Or was he the more pragmatic and earthly man that Xenophon presents in his Memorabilia? By leaving no testament of his own, Socrates became a blank canvas upon which his disciples projected their own ideas and memories. His monumental silence is perhaps the deepest mystery of all. Who was, in reality, the man behind the legend that his followers constructed? The condemnation and execution of Socrates, forced to drink hemlock, became the foundational act of philosophy as a discipline willing to confront power. From the shadow of that hemlock, from the indelible injustice of that condemnation, would emerge the brightest of his disciples, Plato, determined to construct a new universe, a refuge for eternal truth far from the corruptible sensible world, a perfect world of ideas. The method of Socrates, that tireless search for truth through dialogue, had left an open wound in the heart of Athens and an indelible echo in the mind of his brightest disciple, Plato, the condemnation and death of his master in the 399 before Christ. At the hands of the very Athenian democracy that claimed to have restored order after the devastating Peloponnesian War, was a trauma that would define everything. Plato, a young aristocrat who once considered a political career, watched in horror as the opinion of the majority, ignorance dressed as justice, could murder the man he considered the wisest and most virtuous. This personal and philosophical cataclysm sowed in him a deep distrust of the sensible world, the world of politics, appearances, and changing opinions. If truth existed, it could not be found in the public square of Athens. It must reside elsewhere. Driven by this disillusionment, Plato embarked on a long journey that became an intellectual odyssey. It is said that he travelled to Egypt, Cyrene, and southern Italy, where he came into contact with Pythagorean communities. It was during this self-imposed exile that a monumental decision began to take shape in his mind. It was no longer enough to follow the method of his master, seeking definitions of concepts such as justice or beauty in ephemeral conversations. Plato made the bold decision to give those definitions an existence of their own, independent and eternal. If the justice applied in Athens was imperfect and corruptible, it must be because it was merely a flawed copy of a perfect, immutable, and real justice. This was the genesis of his most influential and enigmatic theory, the one that would divide reality into two. Thus was born the world of ideas or forms. For Plato, the universe became split. On one side was our world, the sensible world, the one we perceive with our senses. A realm of perpetual change, of particular objects, of imperfect copies and shadows. The chair we sit on, the tree we see, the act we call just, all of it is transitory, imperfect, and ultimately less real. But beyond this veil of appearances, there existed another realm, the intelligible world, an eternal, immutable, and perfect plane, inhabited not by objects but by pure ideas or forms. In this world resides the perfect chairness, the essence of all chairs, the beauty in itself, of which all beautiful things in our world only participate partially, and of course justice, virtue, and the good in their pure state. But how to illustrate such a radical idea? Plato bequeathed us one of the most powerful metaphors in the history of thought, the allegory of the cave. He asks us to imagine prisoners chained from birth in a cave, forced to look at a wall. Behind them, a fire illuminates objects that are carried along a raised path, casting shadows on the wall that the prisoners observe. For them, those shadows are not representations. They are the only reality they know. The consequences of this theory were seismic. It completely devalued empirical knowledge, the kind obtained through sensory experience. If our senses only show us shadows, then the science based on them can only aspire to opinion. never to true knowledge. Philosophy acquired a new mission. The soul of the philosopher had to undertake an arduous ascent, free itself from the chains of the sensible and emerge from the cave to contemplate the true light of the sun, which in the allegory represents the idea of the good, the supreme form that illuminates and gives meaning to all others. The philosopher became an initiate, someone who had seen the truth and had the moral duty to return to the darkness of the cave to guide others, even at the risk of being misunderstood and killed, a clear echo of Socrates' fate. But here lies the central enigma that Plato left us. If this world of ideas is immaterial and separate from ours, how can we access it? How can our mind, trapped in a physical body, contemplate these perfect forms? Plato's answer is as mystical as his theory. Knowledge is not a discovery, but a recollection. He called it anamnesis. He argued that our souls are immortal and that, before being born into a body, they inhabited the world of ideas and contemplated them directly. The process of learning in this life is, in reality, a painful process of remembering what our soul already knew but forgot in the trauma of birth. Every time we recognize beauty in a work of art or justice in an act, it is because our soul is remembering the pure form of beauty or justice. Was this a literal belief in the reincarnation of the soul, or a poetic metaphor to explain the mystery of innate knowledge? Plato's legacy leaves us suspended before this question, on the threshold between rigorous logic and spiritual revelation. Plato understood that to cultivate these souls and guide them out of the cave, it was not enough with scattered dialogues in the agora. A place was needed, an institution dedicated to the systematic pursuit of true knowledge. A sanctuary for reason. The time had come to found the Academy. But the world of ideas, that perfect and unchanging realm conceived by Plato, could not remain confined to the mind of a single man. To survive, to transcend the echo of history, it needed an anchor in the sensible world, a place where it could be studied, debated, and transmitted. The execution of his master Socrates at the hands of Athenian democracy had left a deep scar on Plato's soul and an unyielding conviction. Politics, without the guidance of philosophy, was a ship adrift in a storm of ignorance and ambition. Athens, still licking its wounds from the devastating Peloponnesian War, was a hotbed of intrigue and disillusionment. The splendor of the era of Pericles was a distant memory, and faith in democratic institutions had crumbled. It was in this climate of uncertainty, in search of a new direction, that Plato's most ambitious project would begin to take shape. The key figure in this intellectual drama is undoubtedly Plato himself. After his failed and dangerous journeys to Syracuse, where he unsuccessfully tried to turn the tyrant Dionysius into the philosopher king of his utopia, Plato made a decision that would change the course of Western thought. He understood that attempting to reform existing rulers was a futile task. The true revolution did not consist of advising kings, but in creating them from their intellectual and moral foundations. His decision was not that of a reclusive academic, but that of a political strategist with a long-term vision. If he could not change the present, he would forge the future. For this, he needed an institution, a sanctuary protected from political chaos, a place where the brightest minds of Greece could cultivate reason away from the passions of the assembly. But where to find such a place, a space that was both physical and symbolic? Around the year 387 before Christ, on the outskirts of the walls of Athens, Plato acquired a property. It was not just any place. It was a sacred olive grove, a public gymnasium dedicated for centuries to the legendary hero Academus. It was an oasis of peace, a refuge from the bustle and politics of the city. Here, under the shade of the olive trees and beside the statues of the Muses, he founded his school. He named it, in honor of the place, the Academy. It was not a school in the modern sense. There were no formal enrollments, nor a fixed and bureaucratic curriculum. It was rather a community of researchers, an intellectual brotherhood united by a common purpose, the pursuit of truth through dialectic and rigorous study. The inscription that, according to legend, presided over its entrance is a code in itself. Let no one enter here who does not know geometry. This was not an arbitrary barrier, but a statement of principles. For Plato, geometry and mathematics were the essential training for the mind. The first step to learning to think in terms of pure abstractions and ascending step by step toward the contemplation of the world of ideas. Astronomy, music, biology, and above all, philosophy were studied. The immediate consequences of the founding of the Academy were monumental. For the first time in the history of the West, there existed a permanent institution dedicated to higher education and systematic research. It became the intellectual beacon of the Hellenic world, attracting students and scholars from all over Greece and beyond. Its existence represented a direct challenge to the educational model of the Sophists, who focused on rhetoric and practical skills to succeed in public life. The Academy, on the other hand, proposed a longer and more arduous path based on fundamental knowledge as a prerequisite for true virtue and good governance. For almost 900 years, with interruptions and transformations, the Academy remained the guardian of the Platonic legacy, a fortress of thought that would survive classical Athens itself, the Empire of Alexander, and the Roman Republic. However, behind the veil of its immense prestige lies the true enigma of the Academy. Did it ever fulfill its original purpose? Plato founded it with the explicit goal of training the philosopher kings who would govern with justice and wisdom. But history does not record any graduate of the Academy who fully embodied that ideal. Was it then a political failure, albeit an unprecedented intellectual success? Or was its true legacy the one that has resonated through the millennia? Something that Plato himself did not foresee? Perhaps his greatest achievement was not creating rulers, but establishing the archetype of the university, an autonomous space for critical thought whose imprint endures to this day. The Academy became a world unto itself, but did it truly manage to transform the outside world as its founder longed for? And within the walls of the Academy, a young student from Stagira, with an inquisitive mind and penetrating gaze, listened attentively to his master. His name was Aristotle, but his path would not lead him to continue contemplating the world of ideas, but to observe, classify, and analyze the tangible world before his eyes, thus inaugurating a new era, that of the science of the empirical. From the very heart of Plato's Academy, with its echoes of debates about a world of perfect and immutable ideas, would arise a mind destined to bring philosophy back to the earth, not as an act of rebellion, but as an inevitable consequence of the very Logos. He was Plato's brightest student, a man whose name would become synonymous with intellect, but whose path would forever distance him from the idealism of his teacher. In the 4th century before Christ, Athens, although still the cultural beacon of Greece, lived under a growing shadow. To the north, the kingdom of Macedonia, under the shrewd and ambitious King Philip II, consolidated its power with relentless military effectiveness. The Greek city-states, fragmented and exhausted by decades of internal struggles, watched with a mix of disdain and fear. In this environment of geopolitical change, of old glories and new threats, a Macedonian foreigner named Aristotle studied for 20 years at the Academy. His status as a metic, a resident foreigner, granted him a unique perspective, that of a privileged observer, yet perpetually external. A position that would profoundly shape his philosophy. Was this distance what allowed him to see the world with a clarity that others, immersed in Athenian politics, had lost? After the death of Plato in 347 before Christ, the direction of the Academy passed to his nephew Speusippus. Aristotle, perhaps disagreeing with the growing mathematical emphasis of the new leadership, or perhaps sensing the rising anti-Macedonian sentiment in Athens, made a crucial decision. He left the city that had been his intellectual home. His journey took him to the coast of Asia Minor and to the island of Lesbos. But the decision that would define not only his life but the course of Western history would come shortly thereafter. In the year 343, Philip II of Macedonia made him an offer he could not refuse, to become the tutor of his 13-year-old son, a young prince named Alexander. Aristotle, the philosopher, accepted, He moved to the Macedonian court, an environment of raw power and unbridled ambition, to shape the mind of the one who would become the greatest conqueror of the ancient world. It was during this period, and especially upon his return to Athens years later, that the Aristotelian system crystallized in all its magnitude. It represented an intellectual divorce from his teacher. If Plato had raised his gaze to a sky of perfect forms, Aristotle lowered it to closely examine tangible reality. For him, the essence of things, their form, did not reside in a separate plane, but within the object itself, inseparable from its matter. This Copernican turn gave birth to empirical science. Aristotle did not just think, he observed, classified, dissected. His curiosity was insatiable. He catalogued hundreds of species of animals and plants, studied marine biology, analyzed the constitutions of more than 150 city-states. To make sense of all this information, he forged the most powerful tool of Western thought, formal logic. His work, the Organon Asterisk, established the rules of deductive reasoning, the syllogism, creating a code for correct thinking that would dominate science and philosophy for 2 millennia. His metaphysics sought being as being, exploring the fundamental causes of existence, and his ethics, presented in the Nicomachean Ethics Asterisk, proposed an eminently practical end. Eudaimonia asterisk, happiness or human flourishing, achieved through virtue as a mean between two extremes. The consequences of this monumental intellectual edifice were immediate and seismic. Aristotle created a complete and systematic alternative to Platonism, where Plato offered a path of mystical and mathematical ascent to truth. Aristotle charted a method of patient and earthly investigation. Western thought was thus divided between two poles, two giants whose shadows would loom over every future debate. His influence on Alexander is one of the great enigmas of history. Were the lessons on politics and ethics what inspired Alexander's vision of a cosmopolitan empire? Or was it the conqueror's power that financed the philosopher's inquiries, sending him specimens of flora and fauna from the farthest reaches of Asia? The relationship between power and knowledge found in them its most dramatic embodiment, but it is precisely at this intersection where the central enigma of Aristotle resides. After Alexander's death in 323 before Christ, a new wave of anti-Macedonian fury swept through Athens. Aristotle, intimately linked to the court that was now hated, was accused of impiety. Remembering Socrates' fate, he uttered a phrase laden with pragmatism. He would not allow the Athenians to sin twice against philosophy. He fled the city, dying the following year in exile. His figure remains suspended in mystery. Was he a pure scholar, absorbed in his studies? A political actor who used his intellect to navigate the dangerous waters of power? Or a pragmatist who understood that to study the world, one must first survive in it? The legacy of his writings is clear, but the man behind them, the tutor of a conqueror and the fugitive from a democracy, remains shrouded in shadows. Yet Aristotle's legacy would not be confined to scrolls or the memory of a conqueror. Upon his return to Athens, before his final flight, he would shape a new institution. A place where walking and thinking would merge, and whose name would resonate through the centuries as a synonym for knowledge, the Lyceum. And so, Aristotle's empirical method, his insistence on observing the tangible world to unravel its secrets, could not remain confined to theory or abstract discussions. It needed a home, a laboratory, a place where systematic observation and the accumulation of knowledge could flourish. This drive would give birth to one of the most influential institutions of antiquity, an echo of the Academy of his teacher Plato, but with a radically different soul. We find ourselves in Athens around the year 335 before Christ. The city, which was once the undisputed heart of the Greek world, now lived under the growing shadow of Macedonian power. Following the decisive victory of Philip II at Chaeronea, Athenian pride was wounded and a palpable tension hung in the air. In this atmosphere charged with political suspicion, Aristotle, the former tutor of Philip's son, Alexander, returned to the city. He was not an Athenian by birth, but a metic, a foreign resident of Stagira, a city with Macedonian sympathies. His connection to the court that had subdued Greece made him an uncomfortable figure. Observed with a mix of respect for his intellect and distrust for his loyalties, was he merely a philosopher or an agent of influence from a foreign power? Aristotle's key decision was not just to return, but how he did so. Instead of reintegrating into Plato's Academy, now led by Xenocrates and increasingly focused on mathematics and metaphysical speculation, Aristotle chose a path of his own. It was a declaration of intellectual independence. He rented a series of buildings next to a public gymnasium located in a sacred precinct dedicated to Apollo Lyceus, from which it would take its name, the Lyceum. Here, on the covered walkways or peripatoi, Aristotle and his followers would stroll while discussing, earning the nickname of peripatetics, the walking philosophers. But the Lyceum was much more than a place for dialogue. It was a monumental project to classify all of reality. Under Aristotle's direction, and with the formidable patronage of his former student, now Alexander the Great, the Lyceum transformed into the first great research institute in the world. As Alexander conquered Persia and advanced toward India, his armies carried not only weapons but also the curiosity of their master. By order of the conqueror, a torrent of zoological and botanical specimens, geographical reports and ethnographic observations flowed from the farthest reaches of the known world back to Athens. The Lyceum became an unprecedented repository, a vast library that rivaled and perhaps surpassed that of the Academy, a museum of natural history, a zoo. Here, Aristotle's empirical method came to life. His students did not merely read about nature, they dissected it. They did not only theorize about politics, they collected and analyzed the constitutions of 158 Greek city-states. Logic, physics, biology, ethics, rhetoric, politics, every field of human knowledge was subjected to rigorous scrutiny and systematization. Was this the first university in the modern sense, an institution dedicated not only to transmitting knowledge but to actively creating it? The immediate consequences of the founding of the Lyceum were profound. It established a model for higher education based on empirical research and specialization, a model whose echo resonates to this day in every laboratory and university library. It created direct intellectual competition with the Platonic Academy, forging two philosophical poles that would define Western thought for millennia: Platonic idealism and Aristotelian empirical realism. The literary output of the Lyceum was astonishing, laying the foundations for entire disciplines. However, this flourishing was intimately tied to the power and protection of one man, Alexander the Great. And when Alexander suddenly died in Babylon in the year 323 before Christ, the wave of anti-Macedonian sentiment that swept through Athens turned directly against his teacher. Aristotle was accused of impiety, the same charge that had condemned Socrates. Finding himself in danger, he fled Athens, declaring that he would not allow the city to sin twice against philosophy. He died the following year in exile, leaving the Lyceum in the hands of his brilliant successor, Theophrastus. And here is where the story of Aristotle's legacy plunges into mystery. After Theophrastus's death, the vast collection of Aristotle's original writings, the notes from his lectures, the intellectual heart of the Lyceum, vanished. Ancient chronicles whisper an incredible story, that the texts were hidden in a basement in the city of Skepsis in Asia Minor to protect them from the kings of Pergamon, avid book collectors. There they remained for nearly 2 centuries. A treasure of human wisdom abandoned to moisture and worms, corroded by forgetfulness. They were only rediscovered, damaged and in disarray in the 1st century before Christ. This is the enigma of the Aristotelian legacy. What part of his monumental work was lost forever in that subterranean darkness? How many treatises on biology, on politics, on logic were devoured by time, leaving only fragments and shadows of a system of thought that once aspired to encompass everything? The collapse of Alexander's empire not only jeopardized the physical legacy of Aristotle, it fractured the world that his philosophy sought to explain. The security of the city-state faded, replaced by the uncertainty of warring kingdoms and a vast, indifferent universe. In this landscape of shattered certainties, the great question was no longer how the cosmos functions, but how an individual can find serenity in an unpredictable and violent world. It was in this void of purpose that a new school of thought, Epicureanism, would offer a radical answer: the pursuit of happiness through moderate pleasure and the absence of pain. As the legacy of Aristotle solidified in the halls of the Lyceum and his empirical method promised to unveil the secrets of the natural world, the foundations of that very world began to crack. The death of Alexander the Great in 323 before Christ not only left an empire without an heir, but also fractured the collective psyche of the Greek world. The era of the city-state, the polis that had been the epicenter of civic and philosophical life for Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, faded into the shadow of vast Hellenistic kingdoms ruled by the successor generals of Alexander, the Diadochi. In this new political landscape marked by constant war, instability, and tyranny, the individual felt insignificant, a pawn at the mercy of colossal and uncontrollable forces. Philosophy, which had once sought to understand the cosmos and politics, was forced to respond to a much more intimate and urgent question: how can a person find happiness in a world steeped in chaos and anguish? Amidst this existential storm emerged an enigmatic figure, Epicurus of Samos. Born a few years after the death of Plato, Epicurus experienced firsthand the precariousness of the new era. His crucial decision, made around the year 306 before Christ, was not to reform politics or speculate about ideal worlds, but to create a sanctuary. He acquired a property on the outskirts of Athens, a place that would go down in history not for its magnificence, but for its purpose: the garden. Epicurus's most radical decision was to open its doors to all, regardless of social class or gender. In a rigidly stratified society, his community welcomed women and slaves as equals in the pursuit of knowledge, an act that alone challenged the conventions of his time. What secret did this garden harbour that made it so attractive and, at the same time, so suspicious to the rest of Athens? The development of events within that community centred on a doctrine that, over time, would be profoundly misunderstood. Epicurus proposed that the supreme goal of life was happiness, and that this was achieved through pleasure. But his conception of pleasure, heidon, had nothing to do with debauchery or excessive luxuries that his detractors would attribute to him. For Epicurus, the greatest pleasure was the absence of pain and disturbance. His philosophy was a recipe for the tranquility of the soul, ataraxia, and the absence of physical pain, aponia. To achieve this, he taught that only natural and necessary desires should be satisfied: food to quell hunger, water for thirst, shelter against the cold, and above all, friendship. Empty pleasures such as the pursuit of wealth, power, or fame were seen as sure sources of anxiety and suffering. Epicurus's physics, based on the atomism of Democritus, was a tool to free his followers from the fear of gods and death. If the universe was merely a whirlwind of atoms in the void, the gods, if they existed, did not concern themselves with human affairs, and death was simply the dissolution of our atoms, the end of sensation, and therefore nothing to fear. The immediate consequences of this philosophy were dual and contradictory. On one hand, Epicureanism spread with astonishing rapidity throughout the Hellenistic world and later Rome. It offered a practical and accessible balm for the anxieties of the time, a guide to life that did not require blind faith or complex metaphysical speculation. Epicurean communities flourished, sharing a simple life centered on friendship and serene reflection, away from the noise and fury of public life. But this very seclusion earned them a sinister reputation. Their rivals, especially the Stoics, accused them of atheism, selfishness, and promoting a life of dissolute leisure. Dark legends were woven about the supposed orgies and banquets that took place in the garden, a caricature that sought to discredit a philosophy whose true power lay in its austerity. The echo of these slanders has endured for centuries, obscuring the true nature of its doctrine, and it is here that the central enigma of Epicureanism resides. How could a philosophy of pleasure advocate for a life of bread, water, and quiet conversation? Was Epicurus's withdrawal from the world a form of surrender to the political impotence of the individual? Or was it instead an act of silent rebellion, the creation of a small-scale utopia in a dystopian world? The garden presents itself in history as a mystery, a paradise of serenity for its followers, and a nest of vice and corruption for its enemies. The true nature of the happiness cultivated there remains an open debate. Was it a deep inner peace forged in the rational understanding of the universe, or was it simply a psychological shield, a delicate fortress built to keep at bay the terror of an unpredictable world? But while the Epicureans sought serenity in the stillness of their garden, withdrawing from the tumultuous stage of the world, another powerful philosophy, forged in the same crucible of uncertainty, would propose a radically opposite path. A path that sought not peace in evasion, but in the iron mastery of oneself in the face of adversity, embracing duty and virtue in the very heart of the storm. While Epicurus and his followers sought serenity in the secluded gardens of Athens, cultivating a happiness based on moderate pleasure and the absence of pain in the bustling heart of the same city, a radically different response to the same existential anguish was about to be born. Not in the calm of a private garden, but under public porticos exposed to the winds of a changing world. The historical context that fueled this new current of thought was one of profound uncertainty. The vast empire forged by the conquests of Alexander the Great had fragmented into warring kingdoms ruled by his generals, the Diadochi. The ancient security of the polis, the Greek city-state that had given its citizens a sense of identity and purpose, had faded, replaced by the feeling of being a mere pawn in a colossal and impersonal game of thrones. In this scenario of political chaos and spiritual unease, the individual felt adrift, seeking an inner anchor amid the storm. How to find peace when the outside world is a whirlwind of violence and chance? It was a foreigner, a merchant from Citium in Cyprus named Zeno, who would bring the seed of the answer. Tradition holds that around the year 300 before Christ, his ship sank near the shores of Attica, losing all his fortune. He arrived in Athens with nothing, and in a bookstore, while reading the memorabilia of Socrates written by Xenophon, he became fascinated. His decision was crucial. He would abandon commerce to dedicate himself to the pursuit of wisdom. But unlike Plato or Aristotle, Zeno did not found a private academy. He made the decision to teach in a public space, the Stoa Poikile, or painted porch, a meeting place in the Agora of Athens. From this humble location, his philosophy would take its name, Stoicism. He would be joined by figures such as Cleanthes, his successor, known for his iron discipline, and later Chrysippus, a brilliant logician who would systematize Stoicism into a formidable intellectual edifice. The development of his doctrine was a silent revolution. For the Stoics, the universe was not a chaotic void, but an ordered whole, a cosmos imbued with a divine reason they called Logos. This Logos was God, it was nature, it was fate. Everything that happens, from the fall of a leaf to the collapse of an empire, is part of a rational and inescapable plan. The key to human existence, therefore, was not to struggle against this plan, but to understand it and live in harmony with it. Living according to nature became their maxim, but how to achieve this? The answer from Zeno and his followers rests on a pillar of devastating simplicity, the dichotomy of control. They posited that in life there are things that depend on us and things that do not. We cannot control health, wealth, reputation, or the actions of others. Trying to do so is a sure source of frustration and suffering. The only thing that is truly under our complete control is our inner world. Our judgments, our intentions, and our responses to events. Virtue for the Stoic is the only true good, vice the only evil. Everything else, health or illness, wealth or poverty, life or death, are indifference. They are neither good nor bad in themselves, but material on which to exercise virtue. The immediate consequences of this philosophy were profound. Stoicism offered an impregnable inner strength. It did not matter how tyrannical the emperor was or how cruel fate could be. No one could take away from an individual their ability to choose to respond with courage, justice, and wisdom. This idea resonated strongly in an era of instability, spreading from Greece to the heart of Roman power, where it would be adopted by such disparate figures as the slave Epictetus, the playwright Seneca, and the emperor Marcus Aurelius. Stoicism became a guide to life, a manual of resilience that taught men to be masters of themselves, to fulfill their duty without complaint, and to see all humanity as part of one cosmic community, a cosmopolis. It forged the character of leaders and citizens, leaving an echo of duty and self-control that would resonate through the centuries in the legal and ethical thought of the West. And yet, at the heart of this iron doctrine lies a persistent enigma, a mystery that the Stoics themselves struggled to decipher. If the universe is an unbreakable chain of cause and effect governed by the Logos, if everything is predetermined, where does free will truly reside? Was human freedom, that capacity for choice that the Stoics defended as our only domain, something more than an illusion necessary to endure our fate? This tension between cosmic determinism and individual moral responsibility became the shadow lurking behind the apparent certainty of their system. But while the Stoics erected their fortress of rational certainty, a shadow of doubt began to spread from the margins of Greek thought, a philosophy that did not offer answers but questioned the very possibility of finding them. Its name was skepticism, and its challenge threatened to topple not only the Stoic edifice but all the foundations of knowledge. If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. While the Stoics sought the tranquility of the soul through virtue and self-control, another current of thought, more radical and silent, proposed a completely different path toward that same peace. It was not based on reason to construct a system, but on the demolition of all certainty, an echo of doubt that would resonate through the centuries, born in an era of chaos and conquest. The historical context in which this new philosophy germinated was one of the most turbulent of antiquity. The traditional Greek world, centered on the polis or city-state, was crumbling. The conquests of Philip of Macedonia, and above all, those of his son Alexander, had shattered the old borders. Power no longer resided in the assembly of citizens, but in the will of a distant monarch. This collapse of political and social structures generated a profound crisis of identity and values. The truths that had sustained generations now seemed fragile. Relative. In this sea of uncertainty where Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Indian cultures began to mix in unpredictable ways, new questions arose. If laws and customs could change so drastically, could there be anything that was truly immutable and certain? In this scenario of seismic change emerges an enigmatic figure, Pyrrho of Elis, a philosopher from the 4th century before Christ. Unlike Plato or Aristotle, Pyrrho did not found a formal academy, nor did he leave a single written text. His legacy is a mystery wrapped in anecdotes and in the writings of his followers. The key decision that would define his life and thought was to join, along with his teacher Anaxarchus, the military expedition of Alexander the Great to the east. It was not a journey in search of glory or loot, but an immersion into the unknown. Pyrrho's decision to march alongside a conquering army exposed him to a diversity of cultures and beliefs that no Greek philosopher had experienced before in such a direct and visceral way. During his long journey through the Persian Empire and into India, Pyrrho came into contact with the so-called gymnosophists, the naked philosophers. Modern scholars speculate that these sages may have been Jain ascetics or Hindu sadhus. What Pyrrho observed there deeply marked him. He saw men living with an almost total indifference to pain, pleasure, and social conventions, reaching a state of unshakable serenity. How was such detachment possible? Upon returning to Greece, Pyrrho began to articulate a radical response. He argued that for every matter it is possible to present arguments for and against with equal strength. Our senses constantly deceive us, and our reason, which depends on those senses, is no more reliable. If we cannot trust our tools to know reality, how can we assert anything with certainty about it? Pyrrho's conclusion was revolutionary. We cannot. The only intellectually honest stance is the epicure, the suspension of judgment. By refraining from asserting or denying anything, by accepting that we cannot know, the soul is freed from the anguish of seeking an unattainable truth. This suspension of judgment leads to aphasia, the refraining from making dogmatic assertions, and ultimately to the ultimate goal, ataraxia, a profound tranquility and peace of mind, the same that Stoics and Epicureans sought, but achieved through a path of intellectual demolition. The immediate consequences of this philosophy were profound, although its dissemination was initially limited. Pyrrho, true to his doctrine, lived a life of legendary indifference, and the anecdotes told by his disciple Timon of Phlius portray him as a sage who remained unmoved by physical dangers nor was swayed by emotions. This attitude generated a school of thought, Pyrrhonian Skepticism, which became the fiercest critic of the dogmatic philosophies of the time. For a skeptic, a Platonist, an Aristotelian, or a Stoic were guilty of the same error, the presumption of having found the truth. Skepticism did not offer answers, but a way of living without them. But here lies the great enigma of the chapter. Since Pyrrho wrote nothing, to what extent is his philosophy as we know it a faithful reflection of his original thought? How much was added or interpreted by his followers, such as Timon or, centuries later, Enisidemus and Sextus Empiricus? The deepest mystery resides in his journey to India. What exactly did he learn from the gymnosophists? Was his skepticism a purely Greek creation, inspired by the example of Eastern indifference, or was it a direct adaptation of concepts from early Buddhism or Jainism? The lack of direct sources leaves this question suspended in time, turning the exact origin of Western skepticism into a shadow, a secret lost in the meeting of two worlds. The enigma of Pyrrho, his transformative journey, and the seed of doubt he planted in the heart of Greek thought cannot be understood without going back to the engine that drove it all. To decipher the origin of this revolutionary tranquility, we must first examine the storm that made it possible. The limitless ambition and conquests of a single man, Alexander the Great. And while Pyrrhonian skepticism cast a shadow of doubt over human capacity to reach the truth, a whirlwind of military certainty and unprecedented ambition was brewing in the north. Philosophy, until then a contained dialogue in the squares and academies of the Greek city-states, was about to be swept away by a force that would redraw the map of the known world. The debate over the nature of being and knowledge would soon be eclipsed by the unstoppable march of a single man, a man whose legacy would forever alter the course of Western thought. The historical context was that of a weary Greece. The endless Peloponnesian wars had left the great city-states, Athens and Sparta, weakened and divided. Their pride and military might were but an echo of what they had once been. In this power vacuum, a peripheral force emerged, considered almost barbaric by the refined Athenians, the Kingdom of Macedonia, under the shrewd and iron-fisted rule of King Philip II, with diplomacy as sharp as his spears, and an army reformed into an invincible war machine. Philip subdued the proud Greek cities one by one, forcing them to join the Corinthian League. The declared objective was to unite the Hellenes against their ancestral enemy, the vast Persian Empire. But fate had other plans. Following Philip's assassination in 336 before Christ, the mantle of power fell upon his 20-year-old son, a young man whose mind had been shaped by the greatest of philosophers. This is where the threads of power and philosophy intertwine in an almost mythical way. The key figure is, of course, Alexander, but the crucial decision was not his, but his father's. Years earlier, Philip II had made the extraordinary decision to hire the brightest disciple of Plato, Aristotle, to be the tutor of his son. For 3 years in the tranquil temple of the nymphs in Mieza, the future conqueror of the world learned from the man who systematized logic and classified life. Aristotle taught him rhetoric, politics, ethics, and perhaps most importantly instilled in him a deep love for Greek culture, always carrying with him a copy of the Iliad annotated by his teacher. Could the great philosopher foresee that his student would apply the lessons about the ideal city-state on the scale of a continental empire? Or that the drive to categorize and understand the natural world would translate into an insatiable curiosity for the lands and peoples he conquered? Alexander's decision to continue his father's campaign and cross the Hellespont in 334 before Christ was not merely a military act. It was the first step in the mass export of a worldview. The unfolding of events is one of the greatest epics in history. In just over a decade, Alexander's armies swept through the Persian Empire, an entity that had dominated Western Asia for 2 centuries. From the Battle of Granicus to Gaugamela, the old order crumbled. But Alexander was not a mere destroyer. In his wake, and with a strategic vision that still astonishes historians today, he founded more than 70 cities, many of which bore his name. The most famous, Alexandria in Egypt, would become the intellectual epicenter of the New World. His policy was not one of subjugation, but of fusion. He encouraged his soldiers to marry Persian women, adopted customs from the Persian court, and recruited Persians into his army. This act of cultural syncretism, although pragmatically motivated to govern such a diverse empire, had an unforeseen and monumental consequence. It created a common space, a melting pot where ideas could travel and mix like never before. The Greek koine, a simplified version of the Attic dialect, became the lingua franca from the shores of Italy to the borders of India. For the first time, a philosopher from Athens, a merchant from Egypt, and an administrator from Babylon could communicate in the same language. The immediate consequences were seismic. The old world of the city-state, centered and introverted, died. In its place, the Hellenistic world was born, vast, cosmopolitan, and interconnected. For the individual, this meant a profound crisis of identity. No longer was one simply a citizen of Athens, with duties and a clear place in a small defined community. Now one was a subject in a gigantic empire, an inhabitant of a much broader and anonymous cosmos. It is in this new psychological landscape where philosophies such as Stoicism and Epicureanism, which we have already explored, flourished. They offered an inner anchor, a personal ethic to navigate an uncertain and overwhelming external world. Philosophy shifted from political debate in the public square to the quest for the serenity of the individual soul. Alexander's expansion not only exported Greek philosophy, it transformed the fundamental question from how to be a good citizen to how to live a good life. And here lies the central enigma of his legacy. Was Alexander a visionary, a philosopher king in armor who, influenced by Aristotle, genuinely sought to create a unified and cosmopolitan world? A brotherhood of humanity? Or was he simply the brightest and most ambitious of conquerors, a ruthless pragmatist whose policy of cultural fusion was merely a tool to maintain control over his vast and fragile empire? Ancient sources contradict each other, painting portraits ranging from the idealistic unifier to the paranoid and megalomaniacal tyrant. The mystery of Alexander's true intention, the ultimate purpose hidden behind his eyes, was lost in the dust of his campaigns and in the wine of his celebrations. His premature death in Babylon left an empire without an heir and a dream perhaps half realized. The answer to this enigma, if it exists, is not found in the battlefields he strewn with the dead, but in the extraordinary legacy of knowledge that his conquests made possible. Of all the cities that bore his name, one would rise as the intellectual beacon of the new Hellenistic world. A place destined to house not only the treasures of the empire, but the sum of human knowledge. And at its heart, his successors would erect a legendary institution, a sanctuary for the philosophical texts we have explored and for the science of the entire known world, the great Library of Alexandria. The conquests of Alexander not only toppled physical borders, but also unleashed a torrent of Greek knowledge that spread throughout the known world. However, this diaspora of ideas, this philosophical echo that travelled with armies and merchants, risked dilution, of being lost in the vastness of the new order. The intellectual legacy of Greece needed an anchor, a gravitational centre that would attract and preserve the wisdom accumulated over centuries. That anchor would not be forged in Athens, but in a new city destined to become the beacon of the ancient world. Following the sudden death of Alexander the Great in 323 before Christ, his empire fractured in a violent whirlwind of ambition. His generals, the Diadochi, divided the world as a war prize. Egypt, the richest and most stable jewel, fell into the hands of Ptolemy, one of Alexander's most astute and loyal companions. Crowned as Ptolemy I Soter, or the Saviour, he faced a monumental challenge. How could a Macedonian general legitimize his rule over a millennia-old civilization like the Egyptian and at the same time establish his supremacy in the competitive Hellenistic world? Ptolemy's answer was not only military but deeply cultural. He decided that his capital, the newly founded Alexandria, would not merely be a center of political and commercial power, but the epicenter of human knowledge. The vision, however, was not solely Ptolemy's. In his court echoed the voice of an exiled Athenian, Demetrius of Phaleron, a statesman and philosopher trained at Aristotle's Lyceum. It was Demetrius who, inspired by the model of Plato's Academy and the Lyceum itself, proposed to Ptolemy a project of unprecedented scale, the creation of an institution dedicated to the Muses, a museion, that would house the largest collection of writings in the world. Ptolemy, understanding the immense prestige that such a project would confer upon him, embraced the idea with imperial fervor. It was not merely about collecting books, it was about collecting the world. Thus, at the beginning of the 3rd century before Christ, the construction of the great Library of Alexandria began. It was not simply a repository of scrolls. The Museion was a cutting-edge research complex, with reading rooms, botanical gardens, astronomical observatories, and residences for scholars. Under the patronage of the Ptolemaic dynasty, agents were sent throughout the Mediterranean with orders to acquire any text from any discipline. The acquisition policy became legendary for its aggressiveness. It is said that Ptolemy III ordered that all ships docking at the port of Alexandria be inspected and that any book on board be confiscated. The originals were deposited in the library and a copy was given to the owner. Was it an act of cultural patronage or an unprecedented demonstration of imperial power? Perhaps both. The result was an accumulation of knowledge that astonished the ancient world, with estimates speaking of up to 700,000 scrolls of papyrus. The immediate consequences of this colossal endeavor were transformative. Alexandria eclipsed Athens as the intellectual capital of Hellenism. Here, the texts of the great Greek philosophers were not only stored but studied, compared, and standardized. Scholars such as Zenodotus of Ephesus and Aristophanes of Byzantium worked tirelessly to create critical editions of Homer, Hesiod, and the playwrights. The complete works of Plato and the treatises of Aristotle, which had begun to disperse, found a safe home here. It was in the halls of this library that the foundations of philology, textual criticism, and grammar were laid. Without the meticulous work of the librarians of Alexandria, it is possible that a substantial part of the Greek philosophical thought we know today would have been corrupted or lost forever in the mists of time. The library was not only a guardian of the past, but an incubator of the future, where philosophy met empirical science, leading to advancements in mathematics, medicine, and astronomy. But like all great lights, the Library of Alexandria cast a long shadow, that of its own disappearance. Here lies one of the greatest enigmas of history. There is no clear record, no definitive chronicle of its end. Its destruction was not a single cataclysmic event, but a slow and agonizing death that stretched over centuries. Did the decline begin with the accidental fire caused by Julius Caesar's troops in 48 before Christ? Or was it the result of civil conflicts and purges of intellectuals under later Roman emperors? What role did the decrees of Emperor Theodosius in the late 4th century play, which ordered the destruction of pagan temples, including the Serapeum, which housed a branch library? And what about the story? likely apocryphal of its final destruction after the Arab conquest in 642, the mystery persists not in who delivered the final blow, but in the understanding that the greatest cultural catastrophe of the ancient world was a process of negligence. Conflict and ideological change, what lost knowledge, what alternative philosophies, and what scientific discoveries were consumed in those invisible flames or rotted in oblivion. And as the smoke of history began to swirl over the fate of the papyri in Alexandria, the ideas they contained had already embarked on a new journey. They had crossed the Mediterranean, finding a new and powerful host, a republic in full expansion that, after militarily conquering Greece, was preparing to be conquered by its thought. The stage was now shifting to the heart of philosophy in the Roman world. While the scrolls of Alexandria treasured the knowledge of an era, acting as silent guardians of Greek wisdom, a new power, forged in pragmatism and conquest, was rising in the West. Rome was not a city of philosophers, but of soldiers, engineers, and legislators. Its genius did not reside in abstract speculation, but in the construction of aqueducts, the drafting of laws, and the administration of an ever-expanding empire. By the middle of the 2nd century before Christ, Roman military power had subdued Greece. The conqueror now found itself face to face with the culture of the conquered, an encounter that would unleash one of the deepest intellectual transformations in history. The Roman elite, educated and aware of their own cultural rusticity in comparison to Hellenic refinement, faced a dilemma. Traditionalist figures, such as the influential censor Cato the Elder, viewed Greek philosophy as a threat to the mos maiorum asterisk, the ancestral customs that had made Rome great. For them, these disquisitions on being and nothingness were a dangerous decadence, a distraction from civic and military duties. However, the tide of Greek thought was already unstoppable. The key decision was not made by a senate or an emperor, but by a circle of enlightened aristocrats. The general Scipio Aemilianus, destroyer of Carthage, surrounded himself with Greek intellectuals, forming the so-called Scipionic Circle. His decision to embrace and sponsor philosophers like the Stoic Panaetius of Rhodes was not a mere whim. It was a calculated act to import the prestige and intellectual sophistication of Greece, with the aim of refining the Roman soul and equipping its ruling class with a new ethical code. But the true bridge between both worlds would be built by one man, Marcus Tullius Cicero. Orator, politician, and writer, Cicero made the monumental decision to translate the complex Greek philosophical systems into Latin. It was not a simple transcription, it was an adaptation, a Romanization. What was Cicero seeking with this titanic effort? Was it merely the vanity of creating a philosophical vocabulary for his mother tongue? Or did he understand that for Rome to govern the world, it needed a language to govern the soul? The process of assimilation was selective and deeply practical. The Romans were not particularly drawn to the metaphysics of Plato or the physics of Aristotle. Their attention focused on ethics. The questions that interested them were not, what is being, but how should one live? Therefore, two Hellenistic schools found fertile ground on Italian soil: Epicureanism and, above all, Stoicism. Epicureanism, often misunderstood as mere hedonism, offered the Roman elite a justification for withdrawing from chaotic public life and seeking private tranquility. But it was Stoicism that became the quintessential Roman philosophy. Its emphasis on duty, self-control, virtue, and rational acceptance of fate resonated deeply with the ideal of the Roman citizen and soldier. Philosophy ceased to be a debate in the agora and became a manual for survival in the forum and on the battlefield. The consequences of this adoption were incalculable. Greek philosophical thought filtered through Roman pragmatism, permeated jurisprudence, rhetoric, and the very conception of power. Stoicism provided men like Seneca, tutor to Emperor Nero, with the tools to navigate palace intrigues. It inspired a freed slave like Epictetus to teach that true freedom resides in the mastery of one's own mind, not in external circumstances. and it culminated in the most astonishing way in the figure of Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who in his Meditations written in Greek during his military campaigns on the Danube frontier, dialogued with himself using Stoic principles to bear the weight of governing the known world. Philosophy had become the operating system of the empire, and here lies the central enigma of this chapter. Why did a civilization of conquerors, the most powerful the world had ever seen, feel the need to adopt the philosophy of the peoples it had subdued? Was it a genuine recognition of a superior wisdom? An admission that military strength was not enough? Or was it perhaps a more subtle tool of governance, a way to create an ideal imperial citizen, resilient, obedient, and aware of his duty, perfectly suited to maintain the vast and complex machinery of the Roman state? The echo of Greek ideas now resonated in the halls of power in Rome, transformed and with a new purpose. But the journey of these ideas was not over. As Rome consolidated its power, its eastern borders became a melting pot of cultures, a place where Greek logic was about to encounter the ancient mysteries of the East, initiating a new and enigmatic fusion of thought. As the power of Rome consolidated its control over the Mediterranean, adapting Greek philosophy to its pragmatic worldview, in the eastern borders of the ancient empire of Alexander, a much older and esoteric dialogue began to resurface. This was not a debate taking place in the forums of Rome, but a whisper travelling along caravan routes, a silent exchange in the libraries of Alexandria and Pergamon, and a fusion gestating in the minds of sages and mystics. This was not a clash of civilizations, but a slow and enigmatic intertwining of souls. The historical context was a fractured yet interconnected world. The successor kingdoms of Alexander, ruled by the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt and the Seleucid dynasty in Asia, had created a vast space where Greek-speaking elites coexisted with ancient traditions. The decisions of these Hellenistic monarchs, although motivated by political control, had an unforeseen cultural consequence. By establishing Greek as the language of administration and high culture, while allowing and even adopting local cults, they created fertile ground for syncretism. Greek became the vehicle not only for the ideas of Plato and Aristotle, but also for the cosmologies of Babylon, the mysteries of Egypt, and the philosophical whispers coming from distant India. The key actors in this fusion were not solely great philosophers, but also merchants, soldiers, diplomats, and priests. Figures such as Megasthenes, a Greek ambassador sent by Seleucus I to the court of Emperor Chandragupta Maurya in India at the end of the 4th century before Christ, left fascinating testimonies. His writings on the gymnosophists, the naked sages, offered the Greeks a glimpse into a form of asceticism and philosophy radically different, centered on renunciation of the material world. Were these men merely an exotic curiosity? Or did they represent a philosophical bridge between Greek cynicism and Eastern ascetic practices? The decisions of the Ptolemies to create syncretic gods like Serapis, which combined the Egyptian god Osiris Apis with attributes of the Greek gods Zeus and Hades, were not mere political acts. They reflected a mindset actively seeking common ground, a universal language for the divine that transcended cultural boundaries. The development of this exchange was subtle and multifaceted. No academies were founded to comparatively study Zoroaster and Heraclitus, but ideas filtered through like water through the earth. The dualism of Persian Zoroastrianism, with its cosmic struggle between light and darkness, good and evil, found a deep echo in late Greek thought, influencing philosophical and religious sects seeking an explanation for the presence of suffering in the world. Babylonian astrology, with its complex system of prediction based on celestial movements, was absorbed and systematized by Greek astronomers, merging empirical observation with a fatalistic view of fate. But what happened when Greek logic, with its emphasis on reason and definition, confronted the mysticism of India, with its concept of emptiness and the illusory nature of the self? The evidence is fragmentary, a puzzle of lost texts and indirect testimonies. However, concepts such as reincarnation, already present in Greek currents like Pythagoreanism and Orphism, found an intriguing parallel in the doctrines of samsara, generating a silent debate whose full scope has been lost in the shadows of history. The immediate consequences of this fusion were the emergence of a more personal and introspective spirituality. While classical philosophy had focused on the polis and public ethics, this new intellectual climate favored the rise of mystery cults and salvation philosophies. Gnosticism, with its complex mythology about an imperfect creator god and the need for secret knowledge to liberate the divine spark trapped in matter, is perhaps the most notable offspring of this union. It is a system that employs the language and concepts of Platonic philosophy, but infuses them with a profound dualism and a narrative of exile and redemption that resonates with Eastern traditions. Philosophy was no longer merely a path to civic virtue, but a way to the salvation of the individual soul in a vast and often hostile cosmos. And here lies the central enigma of this chapter. The evidence is like fragments of an ancient map. We see the trade routes, read the accounts of travelers, analyze the syncretic symbols, but we cannot hear the conversations. What exactly did a Brahmin sage say to a Stoic philosopher in an Alexandria marketplace? What texts of Buddhist philosophy reached their library and how were they interpreted? The true mystery is not whether there was an exchange, but how deep it truly was, and what ideas were transformed, misinterpreted, or lost forever in the translation between worlds. The fusion created a rich, complex, and sometimes contradictory philosophical landscape, a whirlwind of Greek rationalism, Egyptian mysticism, Persian dualism, and yearnings for liberation from India. From this crucible of ideas, from this quest for a transcendent unity, a new and powerful synthesis was about to emerge, a system that would attempt to reconcile the world of Plato's ideas with the mystical longing for the one, a philosophy that would find its most eloquent voice in the figure of Plotinus and the birth of Neoplatonism. And from that complex fusion of Greek and Eastern thought in a Roman Empire that was beginning to crumble under its own weight, a final and enigmatic echo of classical philosophy would be born, an echo that sought not merely to explain the world, but to transcend it. We find ourselves in the 3rd century after Christ, a period that historians have termed the crisis of the 3rd century. The vast Roman Empire, which had guaranteed peace for generations, was ravaged by a perfect storm. Incessant civil wars, emperors assassinated one after another, porous borders besieged by Germanic and Persian tribes, and an economy in freefall. In this climate of profound uncertainty and anxiety, the ancient Roman civic religions were losing their power of cohesion. Certainties dissolved like salt in water, and a deep spiritual longing seized the population. The intellectual elites, heirs to the Greek tradition, sought answers that went beyond the cold logic of Aristotle or Stoic self-control. They needed an anchor, a path to salvation amidst the chaos. It is in this spiritual labyrinth that a figure as mysterious as influential emerges. Plotinus. Born in Egypt, a melting pot of cultures, Plotinus felt from a young age a dissatisfaction with the philosophies being taught. He sought something deeper, a truth that could not only be understood but experienced. His quest led him to Alexandria, to the feet of a master of whom we know little, the enigmatic Ammonius Saccas. Saccas left no written work. His legacy is a whisper in history, but his decision to instruct Plotinus would change the course of late ancient thought. After years of study, Plotinus made a bold decision. He joined the military expedition of Emperor Gordian III against the Sasanian Empire, hoping, according to his biographer Porphyry, to make direct contact with the wisdom of Persian magi and Indian gymnosophists. The assassination of the emperor in Mesopotamia truncated his journey, forcing him into a dangerous flight that would ultimately lead him to the heart of the empire, Rome. There, around the year 244, he made the decision that would define his legacy, to found his own philosophical school, attracting members of the Roman senatorial elite, desperate to find meaning in a crumbling world. What Plotinus taught in these intimate circles was not a simple repetition of Plato. It was a radical reinterpretation, a mystical systematization that we know as Neoplatonism. In his monumental work, the Enneads, compiled and edited by his disciple Porphyry, Plotinus describes a hierarchical reality that emanates from a single, transcendent source. At the top of all is the One, an absolute, ineffable reality, beyond being and thought, from which everything proceeds without itself being diminished. From the One emanates, like the light of the sun, the nous, or divine intellect. This is the realm of Platonic ideas, a world of pure and perfect thought. From the nous, in turn, emanates the world soul, which acts as a bridge between the intelligible world and the sensible world. Ours, the individual soul, is a part of this cosmic soul, trapped in matter, the lowest level of existence, the realm of darkness and multiplicity. But what was the purpose of this complex cosmic map? It was not a mere intellectual exercise, it was a path of return. The philosopher's goal, according to Plotinus, was to purify the soul through virtue and contemplation, to ascend once more along this ladder of reality, shedding the bonds of the body and the material world until achieving mystical union, henosis, with the One. The impact of this philosophy was immediate and profound. Neoplatonism became the main philosophical current of late paganism, offering the intellectual elites a sophisticated and spiritually satisfying alternative in the face of the advance of Christianity. Later philosophers such as Iamblichus and Proclus would take Plotinus's system even further, incorporating theurgical practices and rituals in an attempt to defend the old polytheistic order. Neoplatonism thus became the last great philosophical stronghold of the pagan world, a grand synthesis of 500 years of Greek thought infused with a mysticism that resonated with the anxieties of the time. But here lies the central enigma of Plotinus and his work. Porphyry tells us that his master experienced that ecstatic union with the One on several occasions. What exactly were these experiences? Were they the result of a mental and philosophical discipline taken to the extreme? A kind of psychological short-circuit in a brilliant mind? Or did they represent a genuine vision of a transcendent reality, a real glimpse of the divine that reason alone could not reach? The ultimate secret of Plotinus's experience was lost with him, leaving us with a philosophical system that is both a metaphysical map of the cosmos and the diary of a mystical journey. Plotinus's system was more than a theory about the world. It was a method for transforming oneself. It demonstrated how, in an era of crisis, philosophy was not merely an academic exercise, but had become, perhaps more than ever, a guide to life. And while the teachings of Plotinus ascended towards the mystical sphere of the One, a very different echo of philosophy resonated in the streets and towns of the vast Roman Empire. It was no longer the search for an abstract truth or a cosmic principle, but a much more urgent and personal need, the search for an anchor in a drifting world. The ancient Greek polis, with its civic identity and familiar gods, had been replaced by a cosmopolitan, gigantic, an impersonal empire. For the common citizen, from the senator in Rome to the merchant in Ephesus, life was marked by uncertainty, the arbitrariness of power, and a profound sense of alienation. In this atmosphere of spiritual and existential crisis, philosophy descended from the academies to become something radically new, an art of living, a manual of survival for the soul. The key figures of this transformation were no longer legislators or metaphysicians, but the heirs of the great Hellenistic schools, Stoics, Epicureans, and Cynics. The crucial decision facing an educated individual of the time was not which god to pray to, but which philosophical school to adhere to. This choice defined their character, their reactions to adversity, and their life purpose. Men of immense power, such as Emperor Marcus Aurelius, clung to Stoicism not as an intellectual pastime, but as a shield against the pressures of the throne and personal tragedy. In his Meditations he does not write as an emperor, but as a man struggling to apply the principles of Zeno and Epictetus to the harsh reality of power, war, and loss. On the other hand, private citizens, weary of ambition and public life, followed the advice of Epicurus, retreating to circles of friends where they sought ataraxia, the serenity of the soul through simple pleasures and the absence of pain. The decision to follow one path or another was the most important decision of their lives. This phenomenon manifested in everyday life in very concrete ways. Philosophy ceased to be a text and became a practice. Philosophical schools operated as communities that offered not only knowledge but also comfort and guidance. A philosopher could be hired as a personal advisor, a spiritual director who helped a family navigate difficulties. Letters of consolation were written, such as those from Seneca to Marcia, which were not mere expressions of sympathy, but therapeutic exercises based on Stoic principles to process grief. The practice of writing a personal diary, like that of Marcus Aurelius, became a tool for self-examination and ethical strengthening. Spiritual exercises were performed, the Stoic premeditatio malorum which involved imagining the worst scenarios to be prepared for them, or the contemplation of one's own mortality to live each day with greater intensity and virtue. But was this a democratization of philosophy or a new form of spiritual elitism, accessible only to those with the time and resources to dedicate to it? The immediate consequences of this internalization of philosophy were profound. It created a new type of individual whose identity was forged more in their personal ethical coherence than in their civic role. The ideal was no longer just the good citizen, but the wise person, the man or woman who, regardless of external circumstances, maintained an impregnable inner citadel. This personal ethics, however, also revealed a shadow. By focusing so much on the self-sufficiency and tranquility of the individual, these philosophies risked fostering a certain passivity in the face of social injustice. If the only true evil is an incorrect judgment and the only virtue is inner wisdom, what incentive remained to transform an imperfect and often brutal world? Happiness became a private project, a fortress built to protect oneself from the outside world, not to change it. And here lies the central enigma of this era. These philosophies offered incredibly powerful tools for psychological resilience and ethical conduct. They provided a sense and purpose in a chaotic world, a guide to live and die with dignity. However, despite their undeniable power, their influence would begin to wane. They offered comfort for the soul, but what did they offer for the ultimate mystery of death? They promised serenity in this life, but remained silent about the possibility of justice in the next. The enigma is why these sophisticated systems for good living, which had guided emperors and slaves alike, were not enough. They left a void, a question about suffering, redemption, and the transcendent that they themselves could not fully answer. A void that would soon be filled by a new faith, one that would not only reinterpret the questions of the Greek philosophers, but would integrate them into a narrative of cosmic salvation, marking the imminent transition to Christian thought. And so, while the philosophical schools offered the citizens of the vast Roman Empire a guide for life, a map to navigate existence, this very yearning for meaning and transcendence prepared the ground for the arrival of a force that would change everything. In the crucible of cultures and beliefs of the empire, a new faith, born in the distant province of Judea, began its silent yet unstoppable rise. Christianity did not arrive in a void, but rather in a vibrant setting. A marketplace of ideas dominated by centuries of Greek thought. The collision was inevitable, but its outcome would not be annihilation, but rather one of the most complex and mysterious intellectual fusions in history. The historical context was one of profound spiritual unrest. The Roman state religion, with its civic rituals, offered little personal consolation. Philosophies such as Stoicism demanded an intellectual discipline that not everyone could or wanted to undertake. In this void, Christianity offered a powerful narrative, a personal God, the promise of salvation, and a supportive community. However, for the intellectuals and the educated elites in the Greco-Roman tradition, its doctrines seemed simplistic, even barbaric. How could a faith based on the story of a crucified carpenter compete with the sophisticated metaphysics of Plato or the rigorous logic of Aristotle? The answer to this question would not come from the emperors, at least not at first, but from a group of Christian thinkers known as the Apologists. It was these men, figures such as Justin Martyr, Clement of Alexandria, and the brilliant Origen, who made a key decision that would define the future of Western thought. Instead of rejecting Greek philosophy as a pagan creation, they chose to see it as a preparation for the gospel. Justin Martyr, in the 2nd century, boldly declared that Christianity was the true philosophy. He argued that thinkers like Socrates and Plato, in their quest for truth and universal reason, the Logos, had been Christians before Christ. Clement of Alexandria went further, proposing that just as God had given the law to the Jews, he had granted philosophy to the Greeks as a tutor to guide them toward revealed truth. Not everyone agreed. The vehement Tertullian would ask, "What does Athens have to do with Jerusalem?" But the current of integration was too powerful to be stopped. The development of this syncretism was a delicate and dangerous intellectual dance. To explain abstract concepts such as the Holy Trinity or the dual nature of Christ, Christian theologians borrowed the language and structures of Neoplatonism. Plotinus's idea of an emanation from the One became a model for understanding the relationship between the Father and the Son. The Platonic world of ideas, those perfect and eternal forms, was reinterpreted as the thoughts in the mind of God. The concept of the Logos, that universal reason present in Heraclitus and the Stoics, found its culmination in the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, the Logos, and the Word was with God. And the Word was God. This phrase was a direct bridge, an invitation to the Greek mind to see in Christ the embodiment of the very cosmic reason that their philosophers had sought for centuries. Greek philosophy was not simply used as an ornament. It became the conceptual scaffolding upon which Christian theology would be built. The immediate consequences of this fusion were monumental. Christianity gained an intellectual respectability that allowed it not only to survive but to thrive and ultimately dominate the religious landscape of the empire. A process that accelerated dramatically after the conversion of Emperor Constantine in the early 4th century. A new synthesis was created, a hybrid that would shape the European mind for over 1,500 years. But this alliance also came at a cost. The tools of philosophy used to define orthodoxy were also employed to challenge it, leading to endless and often violent theological disputes over the precise nature of God and Christ. Aristotelian logic, which would later become fundamental, was already showing its double edge. And here lies the central enigma of this transition. By adopting the language and concepts of Athens, did the message of Jerusalem become enriched or irrevocably diluted? Was Christian theology a culmination of the Greek philosophical quest? Or was the simple faith of the early apostles hijacked by a metaphysics foreign to it? The echo of Plato resonates in the writings of St. Augustine. The shadow of Aristotle looms over Thomas Aquinas. How much of what the West came to know as Christianity was, in reality, a continuation of Greek philosophy under a new name? It is a mystery that lies at the very heart of Western civilization, a secret about the identity of its own roots. But as the Western Empire crumbled under the weight of invasions and internal decay, the fate of all this knowledge, both pagan and its new Christian version, hung by a thread. Its survival, the enigma that would define the following millennium, would now depend on the work of scholars in the distant courts of Byzantium and in the caliphates of the emerging Arab world, who would become the unexpected custodians of the preservation of Greek philosophy. And so, while Greek philosophy was filtered and absorbed by the theology of a Christianity in full expansion, a much longer shadow loomed over the original sources, over the Pyrrhonian scrolls that contained the words of Plato and Aristotle in their purest state. The danger was no longer just reinterpretation, but absolute oblivion, physical disappearance. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century had plunged Europe into an era of fragmentation and chaos. The great libraries turned to ashes. The trade routes that once transported ideas were now patrolled by uncertainty and fear. In this new world, the survival of a philosophical manuscript was an improbable. almost miraculous event. The flame of Logos, which had illuminated the Mediterranean for 1,000 years, seemed destined to extinguish. It was a specific decision made by a man in a position of absolute power that symbolized this dramatic turn. In the year 529 after Christ, the emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire, Justinian I, issued an edict that would resonate through the centuries. He ordered the closure of the Academy of Plato in Athens, the venerable institution that had been the heart of philosophical thought for 900 years. For Justinian, a devout Christian and unifier of the empire under one law and one faith, the Academy was a vestige of paganism, a focal point of thought that competed with the revealed truth of Christianity. The last 7 philosophers of the Academy, led by Damascius, took their precious manuscripts and embarked on a desperate journey eastward, seeking refuge at the court of the Persian king Khosrow I. But their exile was brief and disappointing. The echo of Athens was fading. Was this the end of the journey for Greek philosophy? Were its greatest treasures doomed to be lost in the sands of time? What seemed like an end was, in fact, the beginning of a clandestine journey, an odyssey of knowledge that would take a detour of almost 1,000 years. The key to its survival was no longer found in Athens or Rome, but in 2 unexpected places: the monastic libraries of Byzantium and, even more surprisingly, in the flourishing cities of the new Islamic Empire. In Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, scholars and monks like Photius in the 9th century became the silent guardians of the tradition. In the scriptoria of the monasteries, they meticulously copied and compiled the dialogues of Plato and the treatises of Aristotle, preserving them from physical deterioration. They did not always study them with the analytical fervor of antiquity. Often they were seen as exercises in grammar or relics of a glorious past, but by copying them, they ensured that the fire, though dim, would not be completely extinguished. However, the true explosion of interest and the active renaissance of Greek thought occurred further south, with the expansion of Islam beginning in the 7th century. A new civilization eager for knowledge emerged. When the Abbasid dynasty moved the capital to the newly founded Baghdad in the year 762, under the mandate of Caliph al-Mansur, one of the most ambitious intellectual enterprises in history was initiated. It was Caliph al-Ma'mun in the early 9th century who brought this vision to its peak with the creation of the legendary House of Wisdom, the Bait al-Hikmah. More than a library, it was an institute of translation and a research center that attracted the best scholars from the known world, regardless of their faith. Nestorian Christians such as the brilliant physician and translator Hunayn ibn Ishaq played a crucial role. They led a massive movement to systematically translate the corpus of Greek knowledge, first into Syriac and then into Arabic. Aristotle in particular was venerated. His logic, his metaphysics, and his scientific writings became the foundation of Islamic philosophical and scientific thought. The immediate result was a bifurcation in the fate of philosophy. While Western Europe languished with very limited access to the original texts, knowing Aristotle primarily through the Latin translations of Boethius, the Islamic world was experiencing a golden age. Philosophers such as Al-Kindi, Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, and Ibn Rushd Averroes, not only read the Greeks but also engaged in dialogue with them. They commented, critiqued, and expanded their ideas, integrating them with their own theology and creating philosophical systems of astonishing sophistication. The knowledge of classical Greece, far from being a museum object, became a living and dynamic force that propelled advances in medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. And here lies the great enigma of this chapter of history. The legacy of Athens had been repudiated in its own home, first saved by the silent custody of its Byzantine rivals, and then adopted and transformed by a completely new culture and language in Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba. The original Greek texts were safe, but so were their translations and commentaries in Arabic, enriched by centuries of debate. The question that hung in the air, a mystery suspended over medieval Europe, was whether this knowledge could ever complete its long journey back. How could a West that had lost its heritage recover it from those who had safeguarded and reinvented it? The enigma of its return would only begin to unfold centuries later, when in the flourishing city-states of Italy, a new fervor for ancient knowledge would unleash a feverish quest for these lost texts, marking the beginning of what history would know as the Renaissance and the rediscovery of the classics. And so, while Byzantine and Arab scholars acted as silent custodians of an invaluable treasure, the echo of Greek philosophy, muted but not extinguished, began its long journey back to a West immersed in its own intellectual twilight. For centuries, Europe had lived under the shadow of a unified thought, where philosophy was the servant of theology, and the great questions of Plato and Aristotle arrived filtered, fragmented, and often distorted through the prism of scholastic dogma. The continent, ravaged by plagues and wars, clung to a divine certainty, while the vibrant debate of the Greek agoras seemed a memory of a lost, almost mythical world. However, in the prosperous Italian city-states of the 14th and 15th centuries, something began to change. A new class of merchants and bankers, enriched and powerful, sought a cultural legitimacy that went beyond noble blood or ecclesiastical sanction. In the cracks of this old order, an insatiable thirst for the past began to awaken. Figures such as the poet and scholar Francesco Petrarca embodied this new restlessness. In the middle of the 14th century, Petrarca lamented the darkness of his time and embarked on an almost obsessive quest for lost classical manuscripts, traveling through monasteries and libraries, sensing that in those dusty texts lay the key to a more enlightened future. But it was a geopolitical decision thousands of kilometers away that would act as the definitive catalyst. In the year 1453, the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, at the head of a formidable army, made the decision to conquer Constantinople, the last bastion of the Eastern Roman Empire. His military triumph had an unforeseen and monumental cultural consequence. Byzantine intellectuals and scholars, such as the influential Neoplatonist Thales, fled the fallen city, carrying with them not only their lives but the most precious legacy of Byzantium. Original Greek manuscripts of Plato, Plotinus, and other giants of thought, texts that in the West were mere legends. Their destination was Italy, and their arrival in cities like Florence was like a spark in a powder keg. There they found patrons like Cosimo de' Medici, the patriarch of the powerful Florentine banking family. Cosimo's decision to host these scholars and finance the translation of their texts was not a mere act of philanthropy. It was a strategic maneuver to position Florence as the intellectual center of the world, forging a new civic identity based on classical humanism. The development of events was dizzying. At Cosimo's behest, the young scholar Marsilio Ficino dedicated himself to a Herculean task, translating into Latin the entirety of Plato's dialogues for the first time in the history of the West. At Villa Careggi, on the outskirts of Florence, Ficino founded the Platonic Academy, a deliberate echo of the original institution in Athens. There, a circle of artists, poets, and thinkers gathered to debate Plato's ideas on the soul, beauty, and the ideal republic. The impact of these translations was seismic. European thought, accustomed to the rigorous yet limited logic of a Christianized Aristotle, suddenly found itself confronted with the mysticism, the theory of forms, and the political audacity of Plato. It was as if a window closed for 1,000 years suddenly opened, flooding a dark room with light. But was this a spontaneous rebirth, or the result of a deliberate strategy by an elite to redefine culture in its own image? The immediate consequences were an explosion of creativity that we know as the Renaissance. Artists like Sandro Botticelli painted masterpieces such as The Spring, which were not simple mythological scenes, but complex Neoplatonic allegories about love and the soul. Architects like Brunelleschi applied principles of proportion and mathematical harmony, a direct echo of the Pythagoreans. In politics, Niccolò Machiavelli, although often seen as a cynic, was deeply immersed in classical history and philosophy, using the past as a laboratory to understand power in his own time. The rediscovery was not limited to Plato. The works of historians such as Herodotus and Thucydides, of playwrights like Sophocles, were recovered, and Aristotle was reread from his original sources, liberating him from his theological chains. The human being, the Greek anthropos, was once again the measure of all things. The focus shifted from salvation in the afterlife to the realization of human potential here on Earth. And yet, amidst this dazzling revitalization, an enigma persists. Was the Plato that Ficino and his contemporaries presented to Europe the true Plato, or a version filtered through their own Christian and Neoplatonic beliefs? In attempting to harmonize pagan thought with Christian faith, how much of the radically inquisitive and often subversive spirit of the original Greek philosophy was softened or lost in translation? The mystery does not reside in the texts that were found, but in the lens through which they were read and reinterpreted. The Renaissance elite not only rediscovered the past, they actively shaped it to serve the purposes of a new present, leaving a shadow of doubt over the purity of its transmission. The echo of Plato's Academy, resurrected in Florence, would not stop at the Renaissance. It was about to become the foundation upon which the entire edifice of modern thought would be built. The rediscovery of the classics during the Renaissance was not a mere act of academic nostalgia. It was the ignition of a fuse that would traverse the centuries, whose final detonation would shape the very structure of the modern world. After the Renaissance, Europe found itself immersed in a new era of upheaval and discovery, the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution. In this intellectual breeding ground, the shadow of medieval dogmatic authority began to recede. Not before a new faith, but before a much older and sharper weapon, reason, the Greek logos, now unearthed and put to the service of a new human project. But how could an echo of 2,500 years resonate so powerfully in a world that prided itself on its own modernity? The mystery lies in the decisions of a new generation of thinkers, men like René Descartes, who in his quest for a fundamental certainty seemed to respond directly to the Socratic mandate of know thyself with his famous "I think, therefore I am," or John Locke, whose theories on empiricism and the natural rights of the individual appeared to channel directly the practical and observational spirit of Aristotle. In the political realm, the decisions of figures like Thomas Jefferson when drafting the Declaration of Independence of the United States did not arise from a vacuum. They were grounded in the writings of Locke, Montesquieu, and Rousseau, who in turn had drawn directly from the sources of Plato and Aristotle, studying their analyses on democracy, tyranny, and the ideal republic. The decision of these founding fathers to structure a government based on the separation of powers and popular sovereignty was, in essence, a large-scale experiment inspired by the debates of the Athenian Agora. The development of this influence spread like an invisible web. In science, the scientific method, the pillar of all modern knowledge, is a direct descendant of the logical rigor of Aristotle and the audacity of the pre-Socratics to seek natural explanations instead of divine ones. Isaac Newton, in formulating the laws of universal motion, was unknowingly completing the Pythagorean quest for a mathematical harmony governing the cosmos. The classification of species by Carl Linnaeus is a direct echo of Aristotle's passion for categorizing the natural world. In the social sciences, sociology and anthropology were born from the same impulse that led Herodotus and the Greek philosophers to study the customs and laws of other peoples to better understand their own. Are not the deliberations in the halls of power in Washington or Brussels, in essence, a distant echo of the debates on the best form of government described in Plato's The Republic or Aristotle's Politics? The immediate consequences of this massive absorption were the creation of the institutions that today define the West. Modern universities, with their separate faculties and disciplines, are direct heirs of Aristotle's Lyceum and Plato's Academy. Our legal systems, based on logic, evidence, and rational debate, owe their fundamental structure to the rhetoric and dialectic perfected by the Sophists and Socrates. Even in the most intimate realm, that of psychology, we find the Greek imprint. Sigmund Freud, in exploring the unconscious, used terms like eros and thanatos, and his method of talking cure is a form of catharsis, a purely Greek concept. Modern therapies such as cognitive behavioral therapy are based on Stoic principles, the idea that it is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. The legacy is not only intellectual, it is structural, linguistic, and psychological, and yet at the heart of this vast heritage lies a profound and disturbing enigma. The Greeks, from Socrates to the Stoics, sought knowledge not as an end in itself, but as a means to achieve eudaimonia, a good, virtuous, and flourishing life. Their philosophy was a guide for the soul. We, their heirs, have adopted their tools with astonishing effectiveness. We have used their logic to build technological empires, their politics to design nation-states, and their science to unravel the secrets of the atom and the cosmos. But in doing so, have we preserved the original purpose? Or have we turned the pursuit of wisdom into a mere quest for power and control? In mastering the method, have we forgotten the meaning? This chasm between the tool and its original purpose is the great mystery of the Greek heritage in our time. We have inherited the map, but have we lost the way to the treasure it pointed to? This enigma, that of a legacy so vast that it risks being misunderstood, compels us to take a step back and contemplate one last time the total and often contradictory impact that these ancient thinkers have had on the construction of our world. In our previous chapter, we traced the shadow of Hellenic civilization to the foundations of our modern world, observing how contemporary science, politics, and ethics still engage in dialogue with the ghosts of Athens. Now, as we reach the end of our long journey, we pause. It is time for one last reflection, to contemplate the complete panorama of a legacy that has defied time itself. The historical context for this reflection is not a single era, but the entirety of the epochs that followed. After the fragmentation of the Western Roman Empire, Europe plunged into a period of profound reconfiguration. The ancient order faded away, and with it, much of its intellectual heritage. Libraries burned, centres of knowledge dispersed, and vulgar Latin replaced Greek as the lingua franca of knowledge in the West. It seemed that the brilliant intellectual experiment of the Greeks, their bold leap from myth to reason, was destined to become a mere footnote in the annals of a lost world. How then did these ideas survive the fall of empires and the dogmatism of entire eras? The mystery of their survival does not reside in a single event, but in a chain of crucial decisions made by very disparate historical actors. In the nascent Christian world, theologians such as Augustine of Hippo, profoundly influenced by Neoplatonism, made the strategic decision not to eradicate pagan thought, but to integrate it. Centuries later, Thomas Aquinas would create a monumental synthesis between Christian theology and the philosophy of Aristotle, baptizing the Stagirite as the philosopher. This decision not only saved Aristotle from oblivion in the West, but also enthroned him at the very heart of medieval thought. Meanwhile, in the flourishing Islamic world, a decision of incalculable consequences was made by the caliphs of the Abbasid dynasty. In the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, scholars such as Al-Kindi, Al-Farabi, Avicenna, and Averroes did not merely safeguard Greek texts, they translated, commented upon, and expanded them, creating a philosophical dialogue that kept the flame of Logos alive while Europe languished in intellectual lethargy. The development of this preservation is an odyssey in itself. The works of Plato and Aristotle travelled in caravans along the Silk Road, were copied by monks in isolated Byzantine monasteries, and debated fervently in the madrasas of Cordoba and Damascus. The journey back to Europe was slow and fragmented. Through Muslim Spain and commercial contacts with the Byzantine Empire, the texts began to filter back into the continent. The school of translators of Toledo, under the patronage of Christian leaders such as Archbishop Raymond of Sauveterre, became a crucial bridge through which Aristotle, Euclid, and Ptolemy returned to speak in Latin. It was a gradual, almost archaeological rediscovery that paved the way for a cultural explosion. The immediate consequences of this return were seismic. When the humanists of the Italian Renaissance, such as Marsilio Ficino in Medici, Florence, translated the entirety of Plato's dialogues directly from Greek to Latin, a revolution was unleashed. The rigid medieval scholasticism gave way to a new celebration of human potential, reason, and beauty. The rediscovery of Greek political thought inspired Enlightenment thinkers to question the divine right of kings, laying the theoretical foundations for the American and French revolutions. Each time a copy of Plato's Republic or Aristotle's Politics emerged from a printing press, the world became a little less docile to absolute power. But was this Renaissance merely a recovery of the past or the creation of something entirely new upon ancient foundations? And here lies the final enigma of our journey. The mystery is not asterisk how asterisk the Greek legacy survived, but asterisk why asterisk. Why did these ideas, born in the bustling agoras and tranquil academies of a small region of the Mediterranean over 2,000 years ago, prove to have such profound and lasting resonance? Was it merely an accident of history, a fortunate chain of preservation and patronage by caliphs, popes, and princes? Or is there something intrinsic in the nature of the questions posed by the Greeks? Something fundamentally human that makes them timeless? The pursuit of virtue, the nature of reality, the limits of knowledge, the definition of justice. These were not just Greek questions. They were the fundamental inquiries of a species that for the first time dared to use reason as its primary tool of exploration. We have traversed the dusty paths of Miletus with Thales, navigated the river of change with Heraclitus, and contemplated the unchanging world of Parmenides. We listened to the uncomfortable questions of Socrates in the marketplace, ascended to the world of ideas with Plato, and classified reality with Aristotle. We saw how these ideas transformed, nearly vanished into the mists of time, and resurfaced with renewed vigor to shape the world we inhabit today. The Greek legacy is not a static monolith, but a perpetual dialogue, a conversation that spans the centuries. It is proof that an idea, once unleashed, can be more resilient than bronze and more enduring than empires. The echo of that first question, posed under the sun of Ionia, still resonates, eternal and inescapable, in the very heart of our quest for truth.